to the session on object identity and reference types in SQL, as well as we will be talking about the object oriented databases as well as the object relational databases in this session. The learning outcomes of this session, at the end of this session, you will be able to design the tables using object identity and reference types, and you will be able to compare between the OR features and the object relational features. Now, let us see that how we can define these one using the object oriented concepts. So, we are creating the collection values here using the reference types. So, we are defining a type here called as department with the field name as head, which is a reference to a person who is the head of that particular department, with another relation called as people. Okay, so we are taking here, we are creating the type as department where the person head whose information, whose pointer is pointing to the people class here, or you can say the type also. Okay, so create type department. So department is a type here where we are taking two things, name of that person, okay, and then the information of that person. So information that is taken as a reference, so that reference is provided as head. Okay, so what we are writing here, head reference of type person, and what is the scope of that one, people. Why? Because people is a table here, right? So we can create the table as a departments table here. So the type we have created is department and the table we have created is departments. Okay, so create table departments of type department. So automatically what happens, the table is created with name and head here. So how we are defining this one? We are defining this by this particular line. You can see here head, okay, reference with the person, and the scope is people. Okay, what we can do, we can omit the scope also sometimes, and if we are omitting the scope in the earlier definition of the type, then we can specify that in the create table also. Okay, you can see now here that we are creating a table called as departments, okay, of the type department is there, and the options whatever we are providing, head as a as you can see object reference type is there with the options, and the scopes are provided as people in this one. Now how to initialize these reference types? Okay, for initializing that, what we are doing, let us see that we are talking about the examples here. We want to initialize the values, we want to add the values into the table called as departments. So for that, usually the first query we have written, that is insert into departments, where values are we are specifying the department as CS, and currently that reference is not referring anywhere, therefore it is null. Okay, the head, whatever head reference variable is there, that is not pointing anywhere. Okay, and if we want to point that to some of the other relation table, okay, information, so in that case we are writing a query called as update. Okay, so update departments, we are updating the same data here. Set, we are setting the reference of that, and what is that reference, head is the reference, equal to, and we are selecting the information from another table, and what is that table, the table is people. So the tuple of people table is referenced by the head reference variable in this departments table. Okay, so that is provided by this. So what we are writing here, subquery, select person ID, okay, from the people table, and we are taking that as P, where name equal to John. So automatically that information is taken and it is pointed by, referenced by this head. So two tables are referenced here. Now these identifiers, earlier we have seen that we are providing the values there. Okay, directly we are providing the identification. Okay, or user generated identifiers also we can provide. Okay, consider this example here, the type of the object identifier must be specified as a part of the type definition itself. And how we are doing that? Now see what the type we have created is a person. Okay, name, what is there in person, name is there, address is there, and the reference is there, and which is of type varchar 20. Okay, now we are creating a table called as people of the person. Person is a type which we have defined earlier. Okay, you can see here that this person type we have taken as a type here, and we are creating a table. and the reference we are providing is person ID, but it is user generated. The keyword we have written here is user generated, so automatically it is providing the identifiers. Now see, we are inserting the value into that. How we are inserting? We are inserting the value as people. Okay, person ID we have provided, name and address, the three things we want to provide. So person ID we have taken as the user generated thing. So this is a person ID, the name of the person is John and address is provided here. So the same ID we can specify here. So this is the user generated identifier which is specified by the user itself. So whenever we are inserting the values into departments, so we are writing simply value and whatever the identifier is there, that we are specifying. Earlier what we have done, we have taken the select query, we have taken the reference from another table and we have referred. But here we have generated that reference. Okay, user is identifier is generated and that identifier value we are giving here as this one. And how we have provided that? We have provided that by this one. Okay, and in what way we have provided? We are saying that person ID is user generated. So whatever the value of this value given by the user is there, that will be considered as a reference one. Okay, so in this way we are inserting here. Now in this one what we are doing, we are creating the person one, we are creating the table, okay, people, and one more thing we are adding here as an thing, person ID as derived. Okay, if it is derived, then how we can provide it? We are inserting the tuple in this way. Let us talk about the path expressions. What are the path expressions? Path expression means how to get the values from that. Okay, so how we are getting the values from that? We are getting that by pointers. Okay, already the reference are provided. So head is a reference. So wherever it is pointing, from that we are taking name, and wherever it is pointing we are taking the address from that. Okay, from this. So automatically what happens? Actually this information is not available in our relation departments. It is pointed, it is referred by this reference head to other table which is people table. So automatically it is referring that, it is getting the information from people table and it is providing here. Okay, and this is called as path expression. Okay, now if department head were not a reference, then what we can do? A join of department with people would be required. When we want the address and all that, if we are not having this path expression, then we can do the explicit join also. But this is making, whenever we are using path expression, then that makes more easier, it expresses more, okay, easily for the user. Directly we can get the value from that particular path expression. Let us see to implement how the object relational features are implemented. Basically these are similar to the ER features. Okay, normal entity relationship features are there. These are mapped with the relational schema. What is the major advantage here? That whatever the object oriented things we are implementing, these are the subtable implementations we can say, and every table is storing the primary key, and these are defined in that table itself. Okay, each table is storing both locally defined inherited attributes. Those are the things in the OR features. Talking about the persistent programming languages, what exactly these are there? Persistent programming languages means these languages are extended with the added features of persistent data. Means whatever the database handling features are there, those are added in these languages, and programmer can manipulate the persistent data directly here. Okay, so no need to fetch into the memory or store into the SQL and all that. So embedded SQL is, you can say that it is a kind of embedded SQL here. Now in persistent programming languages, few things are there like persistent objects. What exactly persistent object is doing? If I want to take my object as a persistent one, in how many ways I can define that as persistent objects? One way is by class. Okay, means what? Whenever you are declaring a class, at that time you declare that class as persistent, automatically all the objects of that will become the persistent objects. Another one by creation, means if the class is not created as persistent, but I want few objects as the persistent objects and few we don't want, in that case we are creating the object as persistent objects. So in that case class is not the persistent one, objects are persistent. Another one, marking. By marking means already the objects are created, you can mark them as persistent so that those are stored as permanently as a persistent data. Another one, by reachability. Reachability basically you can see that if a base class is there or one object is there, we are deriving that by another one. Then if there is a connection between those two, then based on that the both the things will become the persistent object. So object is persistent if it is declared explicitly or be so or is reachable from persistent object. Okay, if one object is reachable by one of the persistent object, then that will become the persistent object. Similarly, what are the degrees of permanence of object identity? Okay, one is intra-procedure. What is that intra-procedure? During the execution of a single procedure, the object identity is retained. Another one, intra-program, where only during the execution of a single program or a query, the object identity is retained. Next one, inter-program. So across the program executions, okay, the data or the object identity is retained. And the last one, persistent, where even if the program is not executing or it is inter-program, as well as the even the data reorganizations. Okay, all these are the permanence degrees of permanence of object identity. Now, if we are comparing OO with object-oriented databases with object-relational databases, then in the relational database, talking about the relational database, it is simple data type. Okay, it is having a powerful query language with the high protection. Security is very high in the normal relational systems. Whereas in the persistent programming based object-oriented databases, the data types are complex. Integration with programming language is easy. Okay, the performance is high because here what happens, the language itself is added having the features of your databases. Therefore, the performance it may provide high. Now, in the object relational systems, complex data types are there, query languages are high, protection is also there. Okay, but many real systems are blurring these boundaries. What we can say? Persistent programming language builds as a wrapper class here. Okay, whatever the relational features are there, those are offering as a wrapper classes here. So they may be providing poor performance due to this wrapping of the objects also. So these are the comparisons. This is my reference. Thank you.